Well, now that the election's over and after a well-fought battle between both sides, I guess it's okay to just finally admit that, yeah, Project 2025 is the plan. It's always been the plan. Every illegal, it's going back to Mexico. We're bringing out a flock of handmaidens. Every single pregnancy is being brought to term. And we're putting Elon Musk at the top of the government, and he's going to fire every single lazy DMV worker, just like he did at Twitter. And of course, I'm kidding. But if you've been anywhere near a TV in the last 48 hours, you might have actually believed what I just said. We have very different viewpoints on many things.
But a lot of these issues are American issues. They're not Republican or Democrat issues.
So we're here today with Jeremy S. Adams, an author and teacher, and a guest we've actually previously had on, and we talked about his book, Lessons in Liberty. But today we're here to talk about the craziness of this election season and, well, where do we go from here? Jeremy, we're so glad to have you back on Elevated Thoughts. How are you doing after somewhat of a whirlwind of a night?
You know what? I have the advantage of being in the Pacific Coast time. So, I didn't have to stay up till 1 in the morning or 2 in the morning. It's always kind of easier for us here on the West Coast. So, honestly, I didn't need to watch it get called. I think, one of the things that's really obvious is, when you have the Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, it's the same kind of voters, largely the same demographics. So when you kind of see they're all going the same way, you kind of see the writing on the wall. So I didn't need to stay up that late to kind of know what was going to happen, I think.
Yeah, we turned off the news here at around 10 p.m. We put on a movie and then went to bed, and just must have been divine intervention. I opened my eyes. It happened to be 2:30 a.m. and all of the tweets coming in were, he's won, he's done it, he's coming on stage. And I think for you, it must have been around midnight. For him, it was around 3 a.m. and he delivered some remarks after winning. It was very interesting to see, especially in these swing states where so many billions and billions of dollars were poured into these election races, to have what I'm calling a pretty decisive victory. It exposes and of course I'm wearing the hat, I'm the right-wing pundit on the show, but it exposes the fact that the polls, the media, the institutions, all of this stuff can be trumped by just the population coming out and casting their vote. And I'm really thinking that's what happened. I have not seen, and Mike, maybe you can correct me, too much of calls of election interference, misinformation. Have you seen much of that?
There's some funny business that went on in Fulton County. I don't know if you're familiar. I think 32 incidents of either false or unverified bomb threats. But either way, largely, it's not swinging the margins anywhere. I mean, you're talking every demographic group. You're talking key swing states. You're talking just across the electoral map. Democrats resoundingly lost. And I was just joking with you in the pre-show lobby there. I know what a Democrat feels like now after the Reagan election. It was a walloping last night. And it's an important time for a post-mortem, to really go through if the Democratic Party is going to be honest. A lot of, and we can get into that later, a lot of causes and blaming being assigned yet. But I think there's a lot of structural failures just showing, just across the board problems in all the demographics.
I read a quote by Bernie Sanders that said something like, they abandoned the working class, so, well, the working class abandoned them, the Democrats, that is. And it does ring true. You look at every single demographic and all of the, almost every single metric went positive towards Trump. So clearly something that he was doing, something that he was saying, maybe somewhat of his policy positions really moved the needle in this election. Jeremy, what was the policies that you were looking at or following, or what were you hearing from some of your students, which is an interesting perspective that you give us as a high school teacher?
I think what I was looking at, the thing about the policies was that, we know exactly what Trump's bread and butter issues are, right? We know it. He's not really that different than he has been for the last 8 years. He's talking about America first. He's talking about, making NATO pay their fair share. Now he's kind of upped his game. And instead of talking about just protectionism, now he's talking about tariffs across the board, or a 5,000% tariff on Chinese goods, and again, it just goes over and over and over. But so from a policy standpoint, we know exactly what Trump is talking about. It's illegal immigration. It's getting people who have committed felonies and who are here illegally out of the country. We know what he stands for. What I found very interesting is that, I have been, one of the things about being a teacher is, you can make predictions and you can say, hey, I think this is going to be a thing, and you guys can hold me to it. I have 135 students a day, and if I'm full of crap, they will tell me, right? It's not just my wife and my children who will tell me I'm full of crap. It's my students, right? And so they'll remember, hey, you said this. And, back in September, the second unit of the year we do is called political behavior and socialization. And it's the unit that says, well, what groups in America are typically Republicans, who are typically Democrats, who's liberal, who's conservative? And I said there are three groups that I want to be watching for the day after the election. Number one, Hispanics, right? There's been a huge suspicion that demographic is moving away from the Democratic Party. Mitt Romney, you will remember in 2012, told people who were here illegally to go deport yourself. And then he lost the Hispanic vote by almost 30 points. And so I wanted to look at black men. Again, if you're a Democrat, you can't get over 90% of the African-American vote. You are toast. And to get 1 out of 5 black men in this country would have been huge. That is exactly what he got, was 20% of the black male vote. I don't know if you guys saw that ridiculously awkward, painful moment where Kamala Harris tried to go into a barbershop and the dudes just did not want her there. Right. And then finally, I wanted to see about the Jewish vote because, Jews typically 70 to 80% Democratic. And I thought maybe sometimes the lukewarm support for Israel from the Democratic Party would kind of cost them. And so when you ask what I was looking at, 2 out of those 3 were significant. That 79% of Jewish Americans voted for Democrats. That didn't change. I was wrong about that. But the other 2, especially Hispanics. Yeah. Again, I live out in California, fellas. I used to live in a Republican state in the 80s and the 90s, right? We had this is the state of Reagan and Duke Majan and Schwarzenegger and Pete Wilson. And then all of a sudden in the mid-90s, I lived through this massive shift from a kind of lukewarm red state into a hard blue state. And so, and I think a lot of that came about because a lot of these propositions that seem to be somewhat hostile to Hispanic Americans. And so I've always kind of been very fascinated with that group. It's getting bigger. It's getting more powerful. They're starting to vote a lot more. And I think that change, Donald Trump only lost that vote by less than 10%. And he won the male Hispanic vote. Absolutely incredible. Again, just 12 years after Mitt Romney was horrendous with that group.
Well, it's an absolute tell that the border and the border security is something that weighs heavily on Hispanics in this country. They feel that other people are not getting their fair shake because the others who are coming in illegally are taking those opportunities.
So this is just the comparisons, right? So we're looking at the last 2 races, and it's just to the point that we were speaking about is it's a resounding defeat in every demographic, but just specifically Latino men and even Latino women. There weren't really strong losses. There weren't strong gains. The only gain she made was marginally amongst white women, black women, and even just maybe 1% by men. But we'll call that the margin of error. So this is they just lost on every demographic they really needed to be performing, and we're seeing a huge flip. And then there's another screen that I do want to share.
Well, on a more broad level, I would think that, right, you hear from the Democrats that, Hispanics, they're coming over the border. We need to support them. And this is the way that we're going to do it by leaving the border open. And it created more of a humanitarian crisis. We've talked about it on this show where you have people going through Rio Grande drowning their babies while they're trying to walk over here. That's not safe. That's humanitarian crisis.
Yeah, I mean, my students were actually very clear about this. There's this misunderstanding that Hispanics are for an open border. And that is just absolutely not true at all. A lot of Hispanics, came here legally. They did cut the line, and a lot of them do resent that. And not only that, by the way, a lot of my students are from working class backgrounds, and they do not appreciate when you have waves of cheap labor depressing the labor structure in this economy. And so you can't, this idea that this is a monolithic group and all they care about is having an open border is wrong on about 15 different levels. Not only that, by the way, I also, I will throw this in there, and maybe this is a little edgier. I do think there is a cultural problem in the Democratic Party. When I was a kid, and I'm younger than you guys, I'm older than you guys. Sorry, wishful thinking there. I'm older than you guys, but I remember when cops and firefighters and construction workers were Democrats, hardcore Democrats. And I think that what's happened is that the Democratic Party has been co-opted by the universities, by the professors, by the intelligentsia, by Harvard and Berkeley. Again, I'm wearing actually a Berkeley sweatshirt right now because my daughter goes there. But I'm sorry, the worldview of working class Latinos does not want to hear the word Latinx or Latinx, right? They don't want to degender their language. It's patronizing. It's annoying. 91% of them don't like it. And yet progressive insist on doing it. These are family-oriented people oftentimes, very Catholic, very traditional, very entrepreneurial. They don't want an open border. They don't want to suppress wages. And again, the left has completely lost sight of all that. I don't know if that's too opinionated, but I think that's kind of in a nutshell.
It's backed in data. Mike, didn't we talk about it just last week, right?
Yeah. I'll tell you, from being on the left, I think you really, hit on the head there. That's perfectly encapsulating what's going on there. There's this huge disconnect. Just you look at her underperformance in the popular vote as well. The elites that have co-opted the Democratic Party clearly are not thinking in the interests of their voters, and is just a very poor turnout as well overall. So you can see the less people showing up also shows a lack of enthusiasm. So like I said, it's going to be very interesting. I did share a slide a little bit before, but just the key point there is you look at some of these traditionally blue states like New Jersey, even though it's kind of purplish if you want to say it, but overall the electoral map always went blue. It's within 4 points. It's within 4 points. It's barely won. You're talking about a potentially red state either in the midterms or by the next presidential election cycle. So that's pretty crazy to be seeing.
Yeah, I remember when Chris Christie won that state, he said, I know you guys hate Republicans, but you probably also hate a lot of big government. So just kind of hold your noses and vote for me. The thing I would say is last night, and of course, I can always say, oh, I knew, but I will tell you, when he won Florida, and again, I wish the whole country would come in with like Florida. Those people come in like lightning fast. When he won by 12 points in Florida, but in a state where he'd only won by 5 points, and I'm old enough, I remember when Florida was a swing state. I remember the Obama-Romney, the Bush-Gore, Bush-Kerry. The 2000 debacle was around Florida. For him to win 7 more points, to win some of the counties that are heavily Cuban, heavily Latino and Hispanic, I thought, you know what, that's kind of a tell. Nobody expected her to win. She didn't put any resources in there. He's going to win. But a 12-point win? You've got to be kidding me. Something's going on. And then Virginia was ahead for Trump until like the last 15%. And so, it's not like, I didn't have a crystal ball, but I thought, if these trends, Florida, Virginia, these are big states, you can kind of start to see the demographic of who's turning out. And I kind of thought early on, I would much rather be him than her.
So for me, I felt deja vu. Felt like 2016 all over again. Felt like people talking about how close it is, or it should be her race to win. And I just felt it, like on the early totals coming in, that she just didn't have a strong enough lead either in the early voting or mail-in ballots that typically are leaning so heavily Democrat. And I was just, pretty much by 10:30, my wife will verify this. Yeah. I don't have it on Twitter, but by 10:30 p.m. I was sleeping in bed and I said, we're going to wake up to a Trump presidency tomorrow. I can already see it now. She's not winning in these swing states or even coming close enough to that strong enough margin she had. So it was just funny to watch a lot of the electioneering folks on all the major media cycles talking about, well, if she could just capture this county here and just capture this county here, and I'm like, this is deja vu, man. 2016 all over.
Yeah, well, I was holding my breath as a reminder of 2020, saying, oh my God, the blue wave, right? The mail-in ballot proliferation that's going to happen. There might be 300,000 blue mail-in ballots in Philadelphia that come, and it'll take out the whole lead. It
clearly shows how unfavorable Democrats were, and to me, again, this is my opinion here, is that was simply an anti-Trump vote, and then my bias is that most of my votes the last 2 election cycles have been anti-Trump. But to Jeremy's point about this, is there are cultural and structural problems in the Democratic Party that they're just so disconnected from the voting base, and it really reflected in this last election.
Well, I beautifully said, and I would say to you too, like it's kind of, politics in some ways, it's like for me now watching it is kind of like watching the Super Bowl, where I don't, it's fun to watch the game, but I don't really have either, I don't like either team. For me, it's like watching, the Patriots play the Eagles or something. Like I don't care. I just love football. Well, I'm not, I'm not like with either of you guys. And I am like a really small, kind of where I am, I'm one of these kind of January 6th Republicans where, I
don't call yourself that.
Yeah, well, no, like in a good, like I'm against, like I can't forget January 6th is what I'm saying.
I see.
Yeah. No. I did not go to the Capitol. No. I'm somebody who can't.
Hey, wait a second. You look familiar. Yeah.
No. I'm somebody who I can't forget that date. I could never vote for Trump after that. There's just some things that, I consider myself to be a conservative. I'm not a populist. I like institutions. I have a view of the country that's much more conservative. I believe in markets, a traditional morality. I believe in a written constitution. So the protectionism I'm not about, the isolationism I'm not about, the populism I'm not. So I don't even know where I am nowadays politically. I'm kind of maybe, really unpopular. I'm probably like with Mitt Romney 12 years ago. Yeah, that's probably where I am. But I will tell you though that like if I was a Democrat today, and I'm not a Democrat. I'm not. That's just never been kind of my political social philosophy. But I would be super pissed, not at Kamala Harris. I'd be pissed at Joe Biden in a way that is hard to describe. I would be super mad.
Don't let this smile fool you. I am seething with anger today. I'm just trying to be nice about it and realize that there's more to life than politics, like your book said. So I'm applying one of the lessons in liberty.
Well, then I will be angry for you then, even though I was not a big Kamala Harris fan at all. But I'll tell you, he undermined her, I would say, in two different ways. The first way was, I do think Trump is still, and I know you had a big day yesterday, he is still broadly unpopular in this country. I know the right is going to want to portray this as a huge mandate. Guys, you had 3% change over 4 years. That's really what happened yesterday. Let's not overdo it. He did well, but I think a lot of this was also the unpopularity of Harris. And I would tell you, I think there were a lot of Democrats in this country who could have beat him. I think the governor of Pennsylvania could have beat him. I think the governor of Kentucky could have beat him. I think there are senators who are very articulate and moderate who could have beat him. But Joe Biden, because he did better in 2022 than he thought he would do, that what always gets us? Pride, ego, vanity. And he thought, you know what? Hey, I don't have to be this one term, or maybe I am up to it. Maybe I'm more like than I could be. And so he made it so you couldn't have a primary season. You couldn't pick the best of the Democratic Party. There are a lot of great Democrats out there with a lot of talent, a lot of skill, and he closed the door on him. And so I think that's strike number one. And then strike number two, and I know this is going to be kind of a weird thing to say, because I don't know what happened between Harris and Biden. But, a month ago, if I was Joe Biden, I would have called her up and said, you know what, just blame me for everything. Just say, you know what, we should have been serious about the border way earlier and that you would have done it. Say that, you know what, I was worried about unemployment, so we spent too much money, but we won't do that again. Sorry about the inflation. I know what to do this time. Just blame me. Say you do different. Guys, you have a 70% wrong track election. You have a disaffected electorate, and you can't be the change candidate if you have to say, I wouldn't do anything wrong than the current president. You can't do that. And I think if he had said, you know what, just blame me, get your distance, I think she still could have won. And I think she might have been the weakest candidate of my lifetime. And I think she still could have won if she had a permission structure to just kind of distance herself from him. Those ladies on The View gave her a chance. How would you do things different? And she could have said, I would have this, and this. Now, again, I think she was a very weak candidate. She was not very good at this. She wasn't good at it in 2020. She didn't have a long time to practice in her defense, right? A lot of these people have 6 months to practice. She didn't really have it. She just wasn't very good at it. So, if I'm a Democrat, I'm mad at Biden. I do think that there's something positively Shakespearean in the fact that Biden said, my entire career was about becoming president so I could rid the country of this cancer of Donald Trump. And yet what did his vanity do? It was like a boomerang. It gave it right back to the country. There's something. So, yeah. And again, if maybe you like that, maybe you hate that.
I love it. I think you nailed it. Yeah,
sure.
That's perfectly. That really got it. You nailed it.
I looked at a statistic. It was Jake Tapper talking to John King on CNN. They were in disbelief. They brought up a map showing which counties did Kamala outperform Biden in comparing 2020 to 24. And it was truly zero.
It was
they
really
were stunned.
Zero. Not just, literally
so
zero.
You asked, are there any places that the vice president is overperforming Joe Biden in 2020? So we could show you that as well. We just bring that out here. Harris overperforming in 2020.
Holy smokes.
There you go. So let this go away and see if there's anything on the east side there.
Literally nothing?
Literally nothing.
Literally not one county?
Truly gray map, no blue, none. Yeah, it was really weird. And it's a testament, though. Where was the primary? Biden was up in there until 1 week before he fell out to say, I promise you I'm running. And that right there, that was the nail.
And that took a groundswell of many Democrats and really high up members to really finally say, Joe, you need to step down. Talking premier donors of the party and stuff like that. What I'm interested to see is, and I think that Ian Carroll tweet, not someone I would ever thought I'd find myself quoting, but there's a tweet by him recently, and I think it's a really bold move, and I appreciate it. Pretty much just saying that this is a moment here for MAGA MAGA, if you're really called yourself the unity party, to act like it, right? Like, time to walk the walk, really reach out to your liberal brethren and, not see them as the enemy, but, as just a loyal opposition in this whole political experiment. And I would think that this couldn't be a better opportunity right now, after such a contested and divisive election, is for some sort of, hands to be held out and olive branches, right, for aisle crossing to really happen. And I pray that does happen over the next 4 years, something we didn't see the first time around.
Mike, I'm with you, and I agree with that sentiment wholeheartedly, and you and me are a testament to that, right? We're best friends, and we do this podcast, but we agree very much on these issues. I mean, I sent out a tweet early this morning, and people commented, and they were saying, whoa, you woke up with some fire. And you know what? I did, because I woke up and I said, if anybody calls me a racist or a misogynist over the next 4 years, like they have been over the last 8 years, I'm going to bring them to court at this point. I'm going to start physically attacking those people, because
libel
it
and
is
slander now.
Unbelievable. The amount of times, so, right, we want to bring the temperature down. We want to be governor. We want to govern the whole country. Yet on the news, still, we're saying this was a misogynistic move. Donald Trump has prevented 2 women from elevating. It's garbage. There were policies, and then there were not policies.
The mainstream media touting around the message about how outraged Puerto Ricans are going to be by the comments that were made. Clearly just, kind of emperor has no clothes moment, where just shows their complete, out of touchness with, the American viewership. They just are trying to lead a narrative clearly structured that's not really what people are thinking on their minds, and that was reflected in the polls.
Yeah, but look, I would not be the one to defend the mainstream media on here. I'm not defending it, but I would say that I think part of the fun of all this is that you really don't know the morning of the election, when it's this close in the polls, what's going to happen. I mean, to be perfectly honest, what did Trump do? Well, he did something that really had not been done before, which is he took a bunch of kind of disaffected 21 to 35-year-old dudes, bros, who watch Joe Rogan, who love UFC fighting, and they don't typically vote. They're kind of low propensity voters. And he just took that dial and put it on to 10. He's like, I'm going to go on Rogan. Vance is going to go on Rogan. We're going to get Elon Musk on Rogan. I'm going to have, I'm going to have wrestlers introducing me at the RNC convention.
He had live streamers like Aiden Ross and the Nelk Boys, which are really tapped into that.
This is very online stuff, right? And it was kind of a risk, because what she was doing was she's saying, well, I'm going to really up the dial on kind of older Gen Z, kind of younger millennial women who do vote, right? Because women do vote more than men. This really is the gender election. This is such a stratified election. Like the 2016 election was all about kind of rural America versus urban America, right? That was the big divide.
Right.
We thought it was going to be gender because of the Hillary Clinton thing, but it was actually a rural versus urban thing. This election was gender like crazy. And again, I don't know if I already mentioned this, but like Hispanic men voted for Trump, especially young men. People kind of make the joke that like, you're not going to have any babies for 10 years because men and women in their 20s are going opposite ways politically.
Right,
and nobody wants to, you got to be in the same room to have children, which, I know you guys know that because you have kids. But, it is really interesting to see how men and women have become so different politically. And I think that's what the story of this election is going to be. And again, I just, I think at the end of the day, I don't like politics that looks at identity and says, well, I'm going to do this for that subgroup, and then I'm going to do that for that group, and for, gay Latin men from the Northeast, I'm going to do that, and for white rural farmers, I don't like that, guys. I will be honest. I love what you were talking about when you said, it's a time to come together. It's Lincoln talked about, appealing to the better angels of our nature, about the mystic chords of memory. And I just think when we run these elections, it's better off to say, look, my ideas would be good for everybody. I don't care what your skin color is. I don't care what God you worship. I don't care what state you're in. And I kind of hope maybe this is a little bit of the nail in the coffin in this era of very stringent identity politics. Because I do think it's corrosive. And I do think at the end of the day, we say we don't want to pit groups against one another, but I think sometimes that's what happens.
Well, you had mentioned another demographic, which was Jewish voters, and I wanted to bring that back to the surface because I watched a video earlier today that explained how one Democrat, dejected, sad person today was saying how it must have been these Gaza humanitarian supporters that didn't want to go and vote for Kamala because of all the aid to Israel. And they were pointing out that, well, you just turned Gaza to glass by giving Donald Trump the keys. But do you think that the Hamas issue supporting the Palestinian people, I would have called them Hamas supporters, but the Palestinian people, do you think that weighed into people not coming out to vote?
I haven't seen the number of Jewish voters, but I will tell you that the percentage, I believe the NBC exit polls had at 79. I mean, like, and I think 8 or 12 years ago it was only at 70. So, that was one of those groups that I thought, hey, you might, Republicans might be able to snag some Jewish voters. And I think Donald Trump thought that. Remember, he was talking to a Jewish group a few weeks ago. He even, made the comment, if I don't win, it's your fault, which I thought was kind of, he says a lot of weird crap. I know you, I know you like him, but man, he says a lot of weird things. And
for sure, I know he does.
But at the end of the day, though, you get 79% of the vote. I don't think you can really say that had much to do with it. I thought it might, like I said, but when you get 79%, remember, almost all American Jews live in big cities, and where you live is probably the best predictor right now of your politics.
Interesting.
Maybe education's a little more, but again, kind of where you live. If you live in the country and, you have 5 guns and you go to church twice a week, you're probably not a Harris supporter, right? And if if you're a professor of gender studies at Columbia, you're probably not going to be MAGA hatting it very often.
Unlikely, yeah.
So while I don't think it hurt the Jewish vote, I think it certainly did affect, the Democrats' turnout overall, or rather why men, went to the Republican Party. I just ultimately think that they were trying to thread this needle between managing the progressive wing of the party, the far left, and then the the more moderate center that has been typically pro-Israel, and you just couldn't do it. You couldn't manage both. You couldn't have 2 dogs in the race like that. It just divided the vote in my mind. And as we learned, is that the progressives don't show up in strong enough numbers to really turn these elections like they expected them to.
Well, I think that's an interesting point, and I think what's also kind of interesting about all this was, I think she made a colossal mistake picking Tim Walz. I think that's one of these things that, at the time...
It's pretty evident now.
It's very evident
what
now.
Josh Shapiro is doing today.
Well, that's exactly right. I think Josh Shapiro is in the lead for the 2028 nomination, right? I think there's a lot that's good about him. I don't know how much she lost Pennsylvania by in the end. Was it 2 or 3 points, something like that?
It was only about 2%, so it's not this huge swing as people said, but they should have carried Tim Walz's state a lot more so, if it was such an important contribution to the ticket.
But I think he got selected because he had this thing about how weird, Trump and Vance are weirdos, like they're oddballs, right? And I think, at the end of the day, all his baggage, they didn't have a long time to do a background check. So, the drinking and driving and I was at Tiananmen Square, or maybe I wasn't, or, here's my service record. And he just got trounced by Vance in the debate, and I think that, I think her finest moment, I think she trounced Trump in the debate. So, that's just the way it is. But I think my broader point, though, is that even though, we kind of had this moment where like, oh, the Republicans are weirdos, I think Trump was very effective with the kind of middle America, the person who's just kind of average, maybe a bachelor's degree, maybe an AA, they have a normal job. And he had that ad where he said, where they had her talking about, I believe that that the government should pay for, gender reassignment surgery for people here illegally in prison. And I think the normal voter is like, what are you talking about? And he had that other one where it's like, where Trump's ad said, she is for they, Trump is for you. And I think that sense, like these people have kind of a university lounge worldview, that Kamala Harris is kind of a person of Northern California, and she never learned to kind of get beyond that kind of ecosystem of politics where, you're San Francisco, you're Bay Area, this is what we think up here. She never really figured out how to relate to, I think, the construction worker in Wisconsin, or the person who has an oil job in Pennsylvania. And I think that the Trump campaign really said, these are kind of weird people. At the end of the day, Walz can call us weird, but kind of look at the way he talks, look at their belief system. That's very, very odd. And I think, by the way, to your kind of typical middle-aged, Hispanic Catholic church-going person who has 2 or 3 kids, it's just weird. It's just weird to them. And I think that they did a good job kind of flipping that script a little bit.
It should have been pretty alarming for Democrats. I believe it was the Teamsters Union when half of their members are reportedly voting for Trump. Typically your bread and butter Democratic voter, right? A union worker. But that, like I said, that was the writing on the wall. And then, like I said, some of the early voting that was showing up on the polls, and I thought it was pretty much, the story was written before I fell asleep at 10:30 Eastern.
Well, I mean, and again, I don't know if I mentioned this to you guys or not. I mean, but like, did I talk about like how when I was growing up, how cops were, Democrats and firefighters, right? And I think that, I think a lot of the rhetoric about like, abolish the police, or, like out here in California, we decided that, as long as you steal less than $700 worth of goods,
right.
that really we're being really progressive and understanding and compassionate, and out here in California, we had this Prop 36, which reversed to that. Guys, I live in this liberal oasis. 70% said yes to that proposition. Like we're tired of the crime, we're tired of the homelessness, and at the end of the day, I think what the left does sometimes is that they say things, but it doesn't hurt the elite of their party. It hurts the working class of their party, right? So you say, I'm for an open border, I'm for asylum for everybody. Well, that hurts the wages of middle and lower class workers. You say abolish the police. Well, you can say that. You live in a gated community. But that hurts poor people who are people of color who live in these neighborhoods who need to be able to call the cops, right?
Right.
Those
are the folks who are not saying defund the police, right? They're hoping for more cops on their blocks just for presence of security, yeah.
Or when you say things like you can steal up to $700, well, you're taking away people's jobs because nobody's going to want to stay. No business is going to want to stay in that community. So, like, I just think that the left sometimes, we talk about virtue signaling. I think sometimes they're listening to, the college professors, and they're not listening to kind of mainstream working America. I mean, and like, I just think there's a lot of nuttiness that happened in the last 3 or 4 years in the rhetoric of the left.
There's a lot of internal validity problems. There's too much focus group testing and not really getting out there and talking to the average worker or the average folks, that, because like I said, that's clearly what's showing up in the demographics is just this massive disconnect. So I think that the point I want to see, maybe some of your insights, Jeremy, is what do you see now, say kind of your group of Republicans, perhaps that I don't want to just box you in just a couple terms.
We don't exist anymore, yeah.
I know, but that, like the neocons, be you the Mitt Romneys, the free traders, et cetera, the Bush, era kind of Republicans from just a time ago. You saw a lot of them hitching their wagon to Kamala Harris, or coming out and publicly endorsing her and stuff like that. Where do they go in this next election? And do the Democrats try to now maybe push towards like a John F. Kennedy style Democrat, perhaps, to take that legacy back?
Yeah, no, I don't know like where I am, because I always say that I'm a conservative, right? I'm kind of more conservative on things. And it used to be the Republican Party that represented those values and put it into policy. And I think that sometimes, and I'm just kind of pontificating here, you asked me what I think. I think that sometimes a lot of the blessings that have happened in the post-World War II order, we forget about, and I think we take it for granted that, we have a free, open system of globalized rules, that it's our Navy that patrols the sea lanes. We're the ones who keep the peace all over the world. There's a reason why, Russia isn't knocking on Poland's door. There's a reason why Iran isn't being too hostile. There's a reason why China hasn't attacked Taiwan, and it's because of the United States of America. And are we so naive as to believe that if we pull back and lean back, they're not going to step in? And do you really want a world forged with their rules and their values? So, I do believe in a kind of strong, highly engaged foreign policy. I don't know where that is anymore. I don't know which party believes that. I don't believe in tariffs. I mean, anybody who knows Econ 101 knows tariffs are... Solving inflation with tariffs, guys, is like taking an alcoholic and saying, I want to talk about your drinking problem. Let's go to the bar.
The Biden administration already solved inflation, so the tariffs are really to prevent the globalism. Okay, and that's not a joke. It's only half a joke.
Yeah, but the globalism thing, fellas, I mean, like, again, at the end of the day, Trump put all of these tariffs onto specific industries in 2016. Biden kept them on, and we can go back 8 years and say, did those jobs come back? No, they didn't. It doesn't work.
This is where I feel disinfected, and we actually have way more common ground than you might think, Jeremy. I might be a Democrat, but I'm an industrialist by nature, right? Yeah. I may be preaching, the importance of climate change, but I come from my moniker, Recycle Mike. I'm a third-generation scrap metal, an electronics recycler, right? So this is like important to me, and I agree with you. This is like where I find. When you talk about policy, that's where things start to go over people's heads. So really now, I think the conversation for both parties is to discuss the perception. How do I appeal to these voters that it, is what they perceive and what they feel, and it's not necessarily these, as you said, that's great that you have this research and data from this, research institute and think tank, but it's just not what people are feeling, and that's what they're gonna, vote for when the time comes.
Jeremy will like this. There was a statistic we shared on one of our previous episodes, and it was something along the lines of Kamala Harris had to avoid talking about the border and talking about the economy in broad terms. But if she talked about dreamers or separating kids and detention, specifics like that, or if she talked about, child tax credit or warranting black men crypto investments, those were the specifics that would appeal to the emotional base. But again, it's like this, we're going to give all these different groups these different little segments of something. And then actually the couple policies that she came that people really liked, they were freaking recycled from Trump. No tax on tips, bigger child tax credit, all of this stuff. Fund the border. That became a big thing for her now. Why didn't we pass the border bill? Well, we know it was BS. But
again, if you really want kind of those are great points. And I think kind of, if you really want my conservatism coming through right now, I'll tell you, which party is talking about the $32 trillion debt? Who is talking about the fact that we have a deficit of $1 to $2 trillion a year? Nobody's talking about that. I mean, Trump is talking about more tax cuts. I mean, guys, I would love a tax cut.
You can argue Elon Musk is the Department of Government Efficiency, Doge, and truly, I mean, hey, we joke, right? I said it in the opener, and I am joking. I don't think we could fire half the government or 75%. And although it did work on Twitter, you got to go see what's happening. It's amazing on that app.
Yeah,
but
I disagree. But
so if you get rid of some of the glut, though, and that is a big part of what this platform is, right? I believe that Elon's going to be standing in that White House for quite a bit.
You tell me which president in the last 40 years has actually been able to reduce the size of the federal bureaucracy. There was one president who did it one time for a few years. Who was it? You know who it was?
I don't.
It was Bill Clinton in the late 90s. And he did it for just a few years, and then it just exploded. Again, all we talk about is cutting more taxes. And again, in theory, I like a limited government. But guys, at the end of the day, you've got to deal with the unfunded liability crisis in Social Security and Medicare. How do you fix that? You spend less, you tax more, you raise the age. None of those things are popular. None of those things get you elected, but somebody has to be the adult in the room, and no party is talking about that right now. All we want to do is, again, I'd be great not to tax tips. Great, I love it. Who's going to pay for the roads and the bridges and the military and the social, who's going to pay for this, guys? And so it's we need to be honest.
Yeah, we need to have some hard conversations, and maybe that's hopeful me as a Democrat is this is where they seize on that opportunity, because at the end of the day, the issues will matter. We do have to balance this budget again. There's been really no good precedents on increasing average wage, growth over the number of years. So, and until someone actually addresses these, like the debt, like you said before, or getting this prosperity to actually trickle down to that middle class that everyone loves to talk about to get elected, but then forget about the moment that they do, it's really going to come to roost eventually.
Yeah, and like I said before, I just think that the long-term drivers of our debt are going to be a serious, and I think it's a moral problem. I mean, if you think about it, when you run a deficit every year, all you're doing is just admitting you're going to raise taxes on a population that can't even vote yet. And what is the cardinal virtue of democracy? Consent. I give my voice and my consent to these people governing me. But when you borrow so much money, you're just putting tomorrow's tax burden on a generation that didn't vote for this. And by the way, is not going to get any kind of government profligacy or any kind of, the kind of government programs that we have, because they're going to be mired in debt. It is immoral. It's wrong. And I just don't think, again, Democrats will be like, well, it's the billionaires. Just tax your way out of it. You can't tax your way out of it, and Republicans will be like, cut. Well, again, there's no history of us being able to do that. And that's not popular. So
I challenge anybody to actually go through the budget. And I say it to everybody who wants to talk about slashing $1 trillion off the budget. I say, go through the budget and tell me which programs that you would cut. And people love to talk about foreign aid. And I was like, do you know what the USAID budget is? It's like $50 billion out of the multi-trillion-dollar budget. We have a $6 trillion budget that we spend. If you cut all $50 billion, they're not even going to notice it from a rounding error.
That's exactly right. When you talk about the deficit, people are like, oh, well, let's talk about this program of welfare or this or that. Guys, it's something like, I don't know the exact statistic, but like 80 to 90% of the federal outlays are on four things: Social Security, Medicare, defense, and now interest on the debt. Not the debt, interest on the debt,
Just the interest payments.
Just the interest payments, which, by the way, if you're worried about inflation, if you're worried about devaluing the dollar, if you're worried about high interest rates, got to worry about that too. And so, if we're serious, we got to talk about those things. Got to.
Yeah. Well, we're thrilled with what's happening with Bitcoin, that's for sure.
Yeah, that'll solve all of our problems. Yeah, we'll dollarize Bitcoin and then we should be good.
I don't understand that, and I think I'm just like showing my age. Like I've watched videos, I've had teenagers explain it. I don't get it. I just don't understand it. So
the answer is that it lies in the complexity and no one being able to properly explain it. That's the inherent value of the coin.
I'm not gonna let that slide, but this isn't a Bitcoin episode, so we're gonna unfortunately.
You have to educate me at some point on it, because I'm not against it per se. I just don't understand it. I mean,
I'll say this: so when we do head into World War III and the Chinese cut out all of our internet and power, we definitely won't be accessing our Bitcoin when that happens.
Right. I don't know if that electronic wallet's going to be very helpful.
Right. So now that we have, presumably, I think the House is still being deliberated, but we're going to have a triad, an aligned House, Senate, executive, and actually a judiciary as well. And I'm curious if you guys think that this will actually solve some of these problems. Hey, maybe we can have a real talk about Social Security. And even if it might be the Republicans' way of pushing a policy through or a plan, maybe at least this will be a way to get out of this grinded to a dead halt. Like, do you think that at all this is a positive that we have an aligned government now?
You go ahead first,
I can give you want a positive or negative answer? I can give you either one. Which one do you want?
We'll start with the bad news, I guess. It's going to be too extreme, right?
Yeah, I mean, again, I kind of always go back. You guys read the book. You see, I'm enamored with the founding fathers and founding ideas and all of that. And I would tell you that I'm not very hopeful of that, because I think that the way that we elect our leaders nowadays into the House and the Senate, these are not the people that James Madison had in mind. These, traditional citizen legislators were people who were there, who saw themselves as representing the interests of their district and state, but also as agents of the institution and the nation itself. And so they understood, look, this is a diverse country. Read your Federalist Paper number 10. It's all about pluralism and diversity. And so to get things done, I have to compromise. I have to find coalitions. I have to create consensus in order to move the ball of progress forward. And that means that I have to vote yes on a bunch of things that I think are 90% crap in order to get the 10% good. Well, I think what we've done nowadays is we have elected, especially in the House, people who are there to be famous, people who are there to give speeches, people who are there to be outrageous, people who are there to be provocateurs. And they think that if you actually are working to the other side, that you are, you're a rhino, or you're a sellout, or you're a globalist, or you're part of the deep state, or whatever it is, right? The swamp. And it's like, bruh, that is your damn job. You're supposed to talk to the other side, even if it hurts, even if you dislike them. And so my negative answer would be, I don't have a lot of faith in the quality of the human beings in Congress. Not that they're bad people, but the way that they look at their job is not what, Hamilton talked about, men and women of a continental reputation, right? And that's their function, is to kind of use that to build consensus. And I don't see that happening, because they would rather go onto Fox or MSNBC and be famous and be outraged than to actually shake the hand with somebody who they disagree with in order to get a little bit of a job done. So I don't know if that makes any sense to you, but I'm kind of pessimistic.
No, I agree. I agree kind of wholeheartedly with you there. I don't have much faith in my Democrats not seizing on this opportunity for a resistance movement part two. Yeah. It's just too tempting. The first thing that you learn after your formality of the orientation process once you become a member of Congress is your first assignment, and then from that day on forward, is simply fundraising. You are fundraising day in and day out every single day until you get elected the next time. Your staff does the majority of the work, and the think tanks and the lobbyists do the rest of the thinking for you, and you just go vote according to that. And I'm being very generalized and hyperbolic in a lot of ways, but it's unfortunately the way we select for our leaders, like you said, is these aren't people who look at themselves as statesmen and women, to do the job that's been, the honor that's been given to them. It's really, it is a career. I want to become a politician because of how I could leverage that in the future, and not really, I'm here to compromise and figure out what's best for the American people. So I just don't have faith in Democrats, being workable, because we have a blueprint for it. We either be the filibuster or just the way the minority Republicans acted during the Obama terms. There's a lot of way to log jam Congress to get things not done if they want it to be that way.
I mean, look what happened to Kevin McCarthy, right? Kevin McCarthy was actually my congressman.
Right.
Yeah, and Kevin McCarthy was Speaker of the House, and what did they get mad at him for? doing his job because you had this, Freedom Caucus that wouldn't go along with the bill, and he needed to get the bill passed. He needed to get the budget passed. So he said, okay, I'll go to Democrats if I have to. I don't want to. And so what did he do? You went to Democrats in the same institution to get a bill passed because you wouldn't help out. And so what do? We remove him. Right, and then
I want to remind everybody the things that they don't like for the last several years were passed by a Republican Congress. The Speaker of the House, on many times, had to go to Democrats to get things done. So if you don't like that Ukraine funding bill, you could look towards Mike Johnson. He's the one who plugged it in there and kept it there.
Well, and also I think that everybody's like different on the filibuster too, right? Like Democrats have hated the filibuster. We need to get rid of the filibuster, and now they're gonna love the filibuster. They're gonna have those cloture votes every day of the week, and twice on Sunday. Kind of the sadistic, awful part of me. You know what I kind of wanted yesterday? The political science teacher in me. I wanted Trump to win the popular vote and Kamala to win the electoral college. So everybody would have to be a phony. So everybody would have to be like, everybody who's like hated the electoral, like their brains would like fritz out on MSNBC and CNN. They'd have to be like, well, I take back everything I've said since 2016.
That electoral college, it's a time-honored institution that we need to protect, right? Of course, they would change their tune pretty quickly.
Really fast. Exactly. Yeah.
I was seeing memes online talking about the Amish in Pennsylvania. Someone claimed 180,000 Amish came out of the woodwork to vote for Donald Trump, and that's what swung the tide in Pennsylvania. Did you guys hear that?
I did not know that. I mean, what if they had? What did they have? I assume they had to have paper ballots.
So I love these cultural incidents like this because it always gives me an opportunity to learn a weird fact. I learned the phrase Amish taxi because there's certain different interpretations amongst the different communities of Amish about whether they can be in a car if someone else is giving them a ride or not, if that kind of counts. So there is a way to, like, kind of a loophole. Some communities, see it as an Amish taxi is just having someone else give you a lift somewhere else, just your buddy who's not, an Englishman as they call them. So I thought that was pretty funny.
I gotcha. I did not know we were like micro-targeting quite that much, to try and win the Pennsylvania vote. But that's, if you can do it, do it.
Well, hey, I also heard some insider information. We know that Donald Trump in 2020 had a phone call with Brad Raffensperger and said, find me 11,000 votes. Kamala has been begging. She only needs 135,000 in the state. Maybe Raffensperger can find that many for her, too.
But come on, man. We're just talking about, that phone call. So let me ask you a question. Like, does that bother you when you listen to that phone call?
Honestly, I've talked so much about that phone call specifically. I've listened to the whole phone call many, many times. I believe that that's another example of media spinning that into something that it wasn't. At that time, we were all, and listen, this is going to get us booted from YouTube. So be it. There was so much conversation how Trump was saying, you have to find me illegal ballots, right? That's everyone's impression of what that call is. But that's not the case. Brad Raffensperger was the top dog in the state, and that means that he is, or the Secretary of State. So he's the one that says, here's how our election ran, and here's how it went, good or not. But his reputation is at stake to say that the election went well. So he's denying that any of the claims that were made. And listen, a lot of the claims were BS. Rudy Giuliani saying they're moving around suitcases of ballots, or saying that, we sent all the election workers home because there was a water leak. All of these stories have these small elements of truth to them. But again, they were all pretty thoroughly debunked. But there are a couple questions. I'm not getting into the exacts. But the point being, when you listen to the full phone call, it's that, Brad, we've identified X, Y, and Z areas of fraud, all of which have 20,000+ ballots. You get to decide which one's the best for you guys. All this happened. Which one do you want to reveal? Do you want to talk about the 12,000 dead voters? Do you want to talk about the 50,000 out-of-state voters? Do you want to talk about the illegals on your rolls? And he gave him the option. That was my interpretation of the problem.
But the problem with that is the number is I'm just trying to find the exact number that he was short. That's where the whole thing gets debunked.
Well, you're not going to. I agree that he speaks uneloquently, no question about it. But it's the method, or it's the meaning, right? He's not saying you need to inject illegal ballots into the thing like they did out in Arizona. You need to find which ones you're okay blowing up.
You need to keep looking until you get to the number that I want. That is interference.
Wouldn't you say, though, that and this was a big part of the electors scheme that happened where they're saying, he had these false electors. And listen, I read the Jack Smith things, the paperwork.
Indictment, yeah,
It's not good. It's not good. Believe me,
Yeah.
all of the private communications, they knew that they were breaking the law. At that time, though, they would refer back to 1961 in Hawaii when there was quote unquote legitimate election concerns, and we were allowed to investigate them at that time. So when I started speaking, I said, "Oh, we were forced to trust Brad Raffensperger." Well, how do we know? To this day, right, it's still kind of unknown whether or not that Georgia 2020 election was secure. And I'm going to have a thing all edited in here. There's a chart. It shows the number of ballots that were counted. And when you look at 2020, there's a 20 million ballot increase that happened. Where did those 20 million people go? I guess we're talking about how they're dejected. They don't like Kamala.
Because
Anti-Trump vote is what I would say.
Everybody in the country got their ballots sent to them. They were at home for COVID. There was a million ways to do it. I mean, Trump also got a lot of extra votes. It's not just him. I don't know. Just to me, some of the just behavior around that election, like, to me, the at the end of the day, the thing that really kind of ended it for me is, when he was told that Mike Pence was in danger, what did he say? I mean, he literally, his vice president might be, in the process of maybe being killed. What did he say? So what?
Yeah.
I can't get past that. And again, if you line up the policies of Trump versus Biden, I'm with Trump like 8 out of 10 times. But to me, as a traditional conservative, character matters there. And in those kind of moments, that really kind of gives me pause. So I know that's not a popular take. And do you see why I don't really have a party anymore? I just don't feel like I really have a home. But I do love this country, and I do believe in its institutions, and I do believe in justice for all. And I think that we're closer today than we were, 20 years ago or 50 years ago. I mean, I really am a believer in that arc of justice.
It may have actually, sorry, Mike, one more thing. It may have actually been in our episode with you where we said something along the lines of the word statesmanship or statesmanly. And is Trump act that way? And the answer I gave was no, he doesn't act that way. But actually, that's what we kind of need, right? Every parent will say, oh, their kid is listening to this music. It's reprehensible. We can't do it. Well, we're kind of moving in this direction where things are a little bit more free-flowing. Things are a little bit less formal. You're not expected to wear a suit and tie anymore to work every day or on the airplane. So maybe moving away from that is actually not a bad thing, and it's just going to become a way that you talk to Gen Z and Gen A.
So here's what I would say about statesmanship and how important that is. If you want to be tough on China, it's not going to be the U.S. going it alone. It's going to be through a complex trade, agreement or trade system, because the WTO, the World Trade Organization, it's broken. It's not doing anything. Nobody listens to it anymore, not even the U.S. So what's going to be the factor that, you really kind of undermine China's attempts at hegemony in the region is working with all of those partners. And just an interesting article today, not to get into the weeds on policies, but, China has 10 or 20 to 1 diplomatic personnel in Southeast Asia. So for every one U.S. diplomatic official trying to spread the U.S. message and build an alliance system that works against China increasing its influence in the area, they have 10 to 20 individuals doing that. And there's smaller nations that they're slowly racking up that are now recognizing Beijing over Taiwan as the rightful rulers of China. And I know it seems inconsequential, and this is why people talk about like, oh, why do we spend this money on the aid? And it's just to the point of your tariffs before. If these tariffs and this protectionism worked, the ones under Trump and then the now Biden, tariffs, because he kept almost all of them, even sometimes 4 or 8x, increase on them, they're not working. China's actually only increasing its trade deficit with the U.S. So it's kind of like the statesmanship is important in one way. Trump couldn't have been more right about NATO, members needing to commit more. Now everyone's tune is kind of changing about how you really need to get to like a 2.6 or 3%. I'm sorry, a 3.6 figure, not even just a 3%, but 3.6% of GDP to keep up with the needs of the the evolving future. So it's not that Trump isn't right. It's just kind of catch more flies with honey than you do vinegar situation, right? That's my opinion.
That's exactly right. And that's what I kind of say to my left friends is that, you can't deny that Trump had real accomplishments, right? I mean, you had historically low unemployment for African Americans in his term. You had historically low unemployment for Latinos and Latinas in his term. He was absolutely right about proprietary technology in the Chinese. He was absolutely right about that. Nobody was talking about that. He was the only one to say we've got to really take the border seriously. Not just a path to citizenship, but it is a national security threat. It's bad for the economy. And so the problem with Trump is that he's right a lot. So you can't just say he's a bad person, and, he cares about money and power and women, and he's a liar, and he's this and that. The problem is he did have real achievements. The world was more peaceful. Interest rates were lower. You didn't have inflation. And so, I understand where where people who vote for him would say, Jeremy, you're just being an alarmist. You worry too much about, January 6th was an anomaly. Look at the rest of it. I get it. And I guess I kind of in this spirit right now of being charitable. It is the Thanksgiving and Christmas season. So, with Trump, you just don't know what's bullshit and you don't know what's real. And a lot of people have said on the tariffs, he's just, people who know economics will say, okay, we all know that that's crap. But he's just using it as a way to negotiate with other countries because he's very good at that, And so, maybe that's what it is. This is the guy who said he was going to build a wall and make Mexico pay. None of it happened. So I don't know. None of us knows what's going to happen. The only thing that scares me is some of the people who were there to keep the guardrails on in the first term are gone. Those people are gone. Even his own family. Jared is gone. Ivanka is gone. All of the generals are gone. And, he scares me when he says, I want loyalty to me. Well, no, dude, that's not how it works. It's loyalty to the Constitution. That's the oath. And now you have Don Jr. in there, and he is really interested in love life, and he wants personal loyalty to Trump.
Can you elaborate? I have no idea what that is.
Well, wasn't he engaged to Kimberly Guilfoyle, remember? And she's and he just got caught oogling with somebody down in Florida, and
maybe.
Right? Did I get that right? Something like that. Yeah. So I just don't know what the dude's gonna do. You have no idea. We really don't know.
So on a positive note, I will say, as a Democrat, he is our president. He won fair and square, resoundingly. The message is loud and clear, and it's time for both parties to go back to the drawing board because, as we mentioned before, the Democrats have a lot of work to do, and the Republican Party has a lot of work to do to uniting, around not just the entire country, but even within themselves.
Well, guys, before we wrap up, I have a pitch to make to you all and to the country, and I want to see if anybody is going to agree with me when I say this. I've been thinking a lot for 4+ years now, studying it every day. That's my persona on Twitter, is talking about, I'm an election integrity enthusiast, as I call myself. But I've created one of the #1 unhackable, most secure solutions to voting. It's not software reliant. You can't move around memory cards or change things. In fact, I have it right here. This little pen. You cannot delete it. Right, paper. But actually, what my real idea is, I want to have a serialized ballot. And when I leave, I don't get just a little silly tchotchke sticker. I get a little bit of information about how to create a portal to go onto the website and see, oh, look, I can enter my ballot number just like I did my parking ticket. And I can see that it was counted properly and accurately with all the selections that I chose. Because right now, when I go to a polling place and I take my ballot and I put it into a slot on a black box, and then it's gone. And there's no way I can verify that. I'm pretty sure in some states they have that.
California we have a QR code, and we can check it. Yeah,
Florida likewise. Yeah, I can't speak for Connecticut where you are, Cooper, but Florida, we've got a very strong mail-in ballot system that I participated in over 3 weeks ago.
Yep. So can you verify though that you voted for the particular person that you voted for?
I don't know. I haven't checked it. Maybe.
No, I don't think it's like that. No, I think there's a secrecy thing. Would you trust individual patchwork government agencies to host separate, databases and assure you, amidst this, data security? Yes. Okay, you see where I'm going with this.
Honestly, I will. Yes, because guess what? I have my DNA genome sequence in the cloud at 23andMe, and all I need is a 2-factor authentication to go see it. Okay, I have my net worth and my bank account and my bitcoins all on online portals. Okay, it's that's more sensitive to me. My medical information.
We agree that there is something to be done at the voter registration level, and that couldn't harm the process to make sure we get as many folks registered and who are eligible to vote as possible.
Can I double down on it a little bit? Say something kind of unpopular, probably.
Yeah,
I know I don't like this kind of early voting. You get a whole month to do it. I think you should make Election Day a national holiday, give everybody the day off, double the number of polling booths, make sure that poor neighborhoods, minority neighborhoods oftentimes don't have the same number. And if you want to do it in paper, fine. But I think we should have a day of election. I just kind of feel like there's something, I know this sounds kind of nutty, but there's something about community, about coming together and doing something civically together in the same space at the same time And I think this kind of radical individualism that we have in this country, it's spread into voting, right? Where I can do my own ballot in my own room, and then I'm going to mail it. And I get that it's comfortable. I get that it's convenient. Well, damn it, maybe things should be inconvenient sometimes because they're important. Having kids is damned inconvenient, right?
I will trade in mail-in ballot if it's a whole holiday off where we all get to do it together. I don't disagree.
I'm with you, brother. I'm with you.
What is the argument that we have too many holidays? Really? Why wouldn't they just do that?
I think we have too many holidays, and I think that the number of personnel it would take is huge. And again, it's also guys, it's a federalism issue, right? Every state runs their elections in their own way, and so it's kind of like why you're never going to be able to get rid of the Electoral College is you'd have to literally amend the Constitution or get all 51 states, I count D.C. in that. That's why I said 51 to do it together. So that's why it won't happen. Each state would have to agree to it.
Puerto Rico, 52. And Guam, Myanmar, don't they vote too? No,
they don't get electoral votes. Only the 23rd Amendment gave DC 3 votes.
Okay, thank you. That's why we put you on, Jeremy.
Sorry.
I don't know. We heard all about Puerto Rico leading up to it. It's pretty funny that didn't seem to swing anything. So,
no, I'm surprised you weren't aware. That was a whole community notes battle on Twitter about some girl being furious about the idea of Bad Bunny voting because he's Puerto Rican, not knowing that he is a citizen of a state in the 50 contiguous states. Yeah. So he's eligible to vote. Not just he's not disqualified simply because he's Puerto Rican by ethnicity.
Right. Well, I think you guys are much more online than I am. I don't. Who's Bad Bunny?
Bad Bunny is the #1 musical artist in the world, sir, and I've never heard one of his songs.
Yeah, there you go. See.
No, he's
South American.
Yeah. No, so he's Puerto Rican amongst the Latin music. He's kind of one of the biggest names out there.
Okay,
I think he's biggest in the world. Truly,
I'm so old. I still think of Ricky Martin. So sorry, that's. I'm living La Vida Loca, baby.
He's the new Ricky Martin. I'll put it that way.
Okay, I'm gonna have to check out Bad Bunny.
Bad Bunny.
Yeah.
We're not supporting him as fans, but he certainly exists. We know that. Anyway, hey, guys, this was a lot of fun. This was quite an adventure. The last question I'm going to leave it before we wrap this up is, do you think over the next 2 months prior to January 20th, do you think we will hear calls from the left of election interference? They burned ballot boxes in Oregon and Washington. Do you think there's going to be something that comes out where they're going to start questioning this election?
I don't think so. I mean, I think when the very top of your ticket comes out within 24 hours and you make that phone call, I mean, to me, at the end of the day, to me, the most basic American value is the peaceful transfer of power. And if you stand in the way of that, I'm going to have a problem with you, which is, I guess, kind of my hang up with Trump in 2020. And so I think when the top of the ticket says, you know what, we're going to move on. Biden already called him and said we are going to meet soon for the peaceful transfer of power. I think Harris and Biden have behaved very nobly in the last 24 hours. So I don't think that's going to happen.
So I've seen several conspiracies slowly develop and grow on Twitter, so I know what they look like when they're happening. And although there's a very small fringe movement of kind of that hacker, the infamous hacker group Anonymous and a few others kind of pushing forward saying that there's these millions of votes missing, and it's, I think just a matter of a little bit of ignorance of the process and realizing that it takes a couple days sometimes to tally millions of votes. So it's not that they're missing, they're just kind of in queue. So unfortunately, the nature of our process is just going to take a few days. So I don't suspect any kind of interference claims. Even the whole bomb scares in the 32 locations in Fulton County, it's not gonna swing the election. You look at all the states and counties, and it's just not even close.
Yeah,
guys. Well, in the coming weeks, we'll have to stay abreast of who gets blamed for that. I see people pointing towards Russia and China, but I have a feeling that was probably more domestic. From what side, it's hard to tell. But, well, anyway, this was a great episode. Jeremy, you are welcome back any time, especially because you've identified yourself as conservative now. Mike will have to make some friends on his own.
I think somebody who listened to this probably, if I didn't say that, I don't know if people would have gotten to that conclusion. I don't know.
I removed it from my bio. I'm no longer representing myself as a Republican as of a couple months ago. We're skeptical but pragmatic and open to information. I think that's the way to say it, and that's the way it'd be.
Yeah. Well, this was really fun, and I know this was a really different episode than talking about the book. So I don't know if it's what you were expecting, but it was fun. It was great fun, guys.
Well, thank you very much for coming, Jeremy. We really appreciate it. And this has been Elevated Thoughts.